They called me a poor, pregnant burden. But one message revealed that I owned the company paying every one of their salaries.
The bucket of icy, filthy water hit me before I had time to stand. It soaked my hair, floated the collar of my dress, and splashed across the polished dining room floor while my ex-husband's wealthy family laughed around me. His mother, Diane, lowered the empty bucket and smiled. "At least you finally took a bath." I placed one hand over my pregnant stomach, reached for my phone, and sent a 3-word message. "Activate Protocol 7. 10 minutes later, every person at that table was begging me to stop. My name is Cassidy Lane. I was 34 years old, 8 months pregnant, newly divorced, and, according to the Hawthorne family, too poor and too helpless to survive without them. What they did not know was that I owned 51% of Meridian Cross, the $12 billion company that paid every one of their salaries. And that Sunday dinner was the night I finally stopped protecting them from the truth. Before I tell you how the chief of security walked into that house and addressed me as chairwoman, tell me where you are listening from. What city, state, or country has this story reached? Leave it in the comments below, because I truly want to know how far my story has traveled. Now let me take you back to the beginning. I did not grow up poor, but I understood why people thought I had. My mother died when I was 6. My father disappeared from my life 2 years later after deciding that raising a child was too much responsibility. I was sent to live with my grandmother, Evelyn Cross, in a modest brick house outside Pittsburgh. To the neighbors, she was simply Mrs. Cross, a quiet widow who wore old cardigans, drove a 10-year-old sedan, and grew tomatoes in coffee cans on the back porch. But my grandmother had a secret. 30 years earlier, she had helped found Meridian Cross with 2 engineers and a borrowed office above a hardware store. The company began by building communication systems for hospitals and emergency services. Over time, it expanded into logistics, cybersecurity, infrastructure, and medical technology. By the time I was in high school, Meridian Cross had offices in 23 states. By the time I finished college, it was worth billions. Grandmother Evelyn never lived like a billionaire. She believed money should create choices, not noise. She also believed that the fastest way to ruin a company was to let entitled people treat it like a family wallet. Power changes the way people speak to you, she once told me. So learn who they are before they know what you can do for them. That lesson shaped my entire life. When she became ill, she transferred her controlling shares into a private trust. I was the sole beneficiary, but my identity was shielded through legal structures, voting representatives, and a small circle of executives who had worked with her for decades. Public records listed the controlling owner as the Evelyn Cross Legacy Trust. Almost no one knew I controlled it. After graduate school, I could have taken the grand office on the top floor. Instead, I joined Meridian through a small operational audit unit under my mother's maiden name, Lane. I wore ordinary clothes. I drove a used car. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment. I traveled from branch to branch studying how employees were treated when no one important appeared to be watching. That was how I met Brendan Hawthorne. He was a regional sales director then, confident, polished, and ambitious. He had the kind of smile that made people believe he was listening even when he was only waiting for his turn to speak. At first, he was kind to me. He brought coffee to my desk. He remembered that I hated onions. When my grandmother died, he sat beside me on the floor of my apartment while I cried and did not once look at his phone. I almost told him the truth that night. I almost said, "The woman I lost did not just raise me. She built the company where we work, and now I own it." But grief made me cautious, and something grandmother had written in her final letter stopped me. Do not reveal yourself to someone simply because you are lonely. Let time reveal them first. So I waited. Brendan proposed 11 months later. His family welcomed me with smiles that never reached their eyes. His father, Robert, was a senior vice president at Meridian. His mother, Diane, ran corporate hospitality. His younger brother, Caleb, worked in procurement. His sister, Vanessa, managed a regional communications team. The Hawthornes liked to describe themselves as a Meridian family. In reality, they had spent years using Robert's influence to place relatives in comfortable positions. At our engagement dinner, Diane asked what my parents did. "My mother passed away," I said. "My father is not in my life." She tilted her head with rehearsed sympathy. "And you have no family money." Brendan laughed as though she had made a harmless joke. "Mom, Cassidy is not marrying me for money." Diane looked at my simple dress and replied, "That remains to be seen." I should have walked away then. Instead, I told myself that love required patience. For the first 2 years of our marriage, Brendan remained mostly the man I had met. He cooked on Friday nights. He left notes in my lunch bag. He talked about building a future together. Then Robert helped him secure a promotion. Slowly, he changed. He started correcting me in front of others. He called my work little audit projects. He complained that my clothes embarrassed him at corporate events. He opened a separate bank account and said he was protecting us because I did not understand serious money. I continued working quietly with Arthur Bell, Meridian's executive vice president of legal affairs, and Mara Chen, the chief financial officer. Every quarter, I reviewed the company's finances from a private office registered to the trust. I voted on major acquisitions. I approved executive compensation. I also ordered internal reviews whenever something felt wrong. By then, several things felt wrong around the Hawthorne division. Procurement costs were rising without explanation. A consulting company called North Vale Strategies kept winning contracts despite submitting weak proposals. Sales bonuses were being paid on revenue that had not fully materialized. The signatures led repeatedly to Brendan, Robert, or Caleb. Arthur wanted to launch a formal investigation immediately. I stopped him. "Not yet," I said. "Cassidy, the pattern is serious." "I know. Then why wait?" Because Brendan was still my husband. Because I was ashamed that the man sleeping beside me might be stealing from the company my grandmother built. Because part of me hoped there was an innocent explanation. That was my first major mistake. My second mistake was telling Brendan I was pregnant before I understood how completely he had changed. I found out on a rainy Tuesday morning. I took 3 tests because I could not believe the first 2. Then I sat on the bathroom floor holding the results and laughing through tears. For years, Brendan had talked about wanting a daughter. I planned a small surprise. I placed a pair of white baby socks inside a gift box and waited for him to come home. He arrived after midnight smelling of expensive perfume that was not mine. When he opened the box, his face went blank. "You're pregnant." "Yes." "How far?" "Almost 7 weeks." He sat down slowly. I waited for joy. Instead, he rubbed both hands over his face and whispered, "This is terrible timing." Those 4 words told me more than any confession could have. I asked whether there was someone else. He denied it. I asked again. He became angry. Then his phone lit up on the counter. Jessica Moore. I knew Jessica. She worked as a strategy consultant on Brendan's largest account. She was beautiful, sharp, and always slightly too familiar with him at company events. The preview on his screen read, "I miss you already. Tell me when she knows." I did not scream. I did not throw the phone. I simply turned it toward him. Brendan stared at the message, and something in his expression changed. The guilt disappeared. In its place came relief. "Yes," he said. "There is someone else?" I remember looking down at the tiny socks in the box. "How long?" 8 months. 8 months. While he held me at night, he had been building another life. While I attended fertility appointments alone, he had been traveling with Jessica under the excuse of client meetings. While he promised we were trying to save our marriage, he had already decided I was temporary. He moved into the guest room that night. 3 days later, Diane called me. I thought she might ask whether it was all right. Instead, she said, "Brendan tells me you are making this difficult." He had an affair? Men make mistakes? For 8 months? Do not become dramatic, Cassidy. Stress is bad for the baby. Then she lowered her voice. "You need to be realistic. Brendan has a future at Meridian. You do not. Sign whatever his attorney sends, accept a reasonable amount, and move on quietly." I nearly laughed. She was advising the owner of Meridian Cross to avoid interfering with her son's future at my company. Still, I kept my identity secret, not because I was afraid, because I needed to know how far they would go when they believed I had no power. The answer arrived quickly. Brendan filed for divorce and requested that I leave the house, even though I had paid the down payment through a private account. His attorney offered me a settlement of $20,000 if I signed a broad confidentiality agreement and waived any claim to future support. The agreement also included language that could have limited my ability to discuss financial misconduct I had observed at work. That clause caught Arthur's attention. "They are not only trying to silence an ex-wife," he told me, "they are trying to silence a witness." So we began watching more closely. Mara assigned an independent forensic team to review vendor payments. They discovered that North Vale Strategies was registered through a chain of limited liability companies. The final beneficiary was a trust controlled by Diane's brother. Caleb had approved the contracts. Robert had pressured finance to release early payments. Brendan had certified that the services were complete. Jessica had helped prepare the presentations used to justify the work. Over 3 years, more than $18 million had moved through the arrangement. Some of the money returned to the Hawthorne family through property purchases, consulting fees, and the evidence was ugly. But the investigation was not yet complete. Arthur asked again for permission to suspend them. Again, I waited. I wanted every fact verified. I wanted no one to claim that a bitter pregnant woman had used power to punish her unfaithful husband. I wanted the truth to stand without my anger holding it up. Then the intimidation began. My company laptop disappeared from my apartment for 2 hours and reappeared on the kitchen table. Someone attempted to access the trust ownership files using Brendan's credentials. Jessica sent me a message saying, "You should think about what kind of mother survives a public scandal." Robert called my supervisor and suggested I be placed on medical leave because pregnancy had made me unstable. Diane told relatives that I had trapped Brendan with a baby. And Brendan started appearing outside my doctor's office, demanding that I sign the settlement. That was when Arthur created Protocol 7. It was not a dramatic punishment button, as Brendan later claimed. It was an emergency governance procedure. If a controlling owner, board officer, or protected witness faced coercion connected to suspected corporate misconduct, Protocol 7 could freeze internal access, preserve electronic records, suspend financial authority, secure company devices, and activate an independent legal response. It required 3 things: credible evidence, an immediate threat, and my direct authorization. By the week of Diane's dinner, the credible evidence was already sitting in 3 encrypted servers. All we lacked was the final trigger. The invitation arrived on a Thursday. Brendan wrote, "My family wants one calm dinner. We should settle everything before the baby comes." I knew it could be a trap. Arthur begged me not to go. Mara offered to send attorneys instead, but something in me needed to face them one last time. I also wanted to hear what they would say when they believed I was alone. So I agreed, but I took precautions. My phone automatically transmitted audio to a secure file. Graham Voss, Meridian's chief of security, waited with a response team 6 minutes away. Arthur had the suspension notices prepared. Mara had already isolated the accounts connected to the investigation. I did not go to start a war. I went to give them one final chance to choose decency. Diane opened the door wearing pearls and a cream-colored dress. She looked at my maternity coat and said, "You could have made an effort. I came to talk. Then try not to ruin dinner." Inside, the entire family was present. Robert sat at the head of the table. Caleb and Vanessa sat beside their spouses. Brendan sat near the center, and Jessica sat in the chair that had once been mine. For 1 second, no one spoke. Then Jessica smiled and touched Brendan's arm. "I hope this isn't uncomfortable." "It is revealing," I said. Brendan rolled his eyes. "Please do not make a scene." I took the only empty seat, which had been placed at the far end near the kitchen door. Dinner began with small insults disguised as conversation. Diane asked whether I had found affordable housing. Robert wondered aloud whether a child raised by a single mother could develop properly. Vanessa said maternity clothes were not an excuse to stop caring about appearance. Caleb joked that I should apply for government assistance before the baby arrived. Each time, Brendan stared at his plate. He did not defend me once. Then Robert placed a folder beside my plate. "Signed tonight," he said. Inside was a revised settlement. The amount had dropped from $20,000 to $12,000. The confidentiality language had grown stricter. A new clause required me to resign from Meridian and surrender all company materials in my possession. I closed the folder. "No." Robert's expression hardened. "You are in no position to refuse." "I just did." Diane set down her wine glass. "What invited you here out of kindness?" "You invited me here to pressure me." Jessica laughed softly. "No one has to pressure you. You have no leverage." I looked around the table. That was the moment I understood that none of them felt even a trace of guilt. They believed kindness was weakness. They believed silence was surrender. They believed the truth belonged to whoever had the most expensive lawyer. I pushed the folder back toward Robert. "I will not sign." Brendan finally looked at me. "Cassidy, be smart. You have a baby coming. You cannot afford a fight." "I can afford more than you think." Diane stood. Her chair scraped across the floor. "You always speak as though you are better than us." "I have never said that." "You did not have to. You walk into this house wearing cheap shoes and judging everyone. I am judging what you are doing right now." Her face tightened. Then she walked toward the kitchen. I assumed she was leaving the room to calm down. Instead, she returned carrying a metal bucket. The water inside was gray and cloudy. Later, Graham's team discovered it had been used to rinse dirt from the back patio and clean the family's dog bowls. Diane stopped behind me. Brendan saw the bucket. He could have warned me. He could have stood. He did neither. The water struck the top of my head like a sheet of ice. My body jerked from the shock. For one terrifying second, pain tightened across my abdomen. I pressed both hands over my stomach and waited for my daughter to move. Then I felt one strong kick. Relief passed through me. Around the table, laughter rose. Diane smiled down at me. "At least you finally took a bath." Jessica covered her mouth, but her shoulders shook with laughter. "Someone find her an old towel," she said. "We do not want dirty water ruining the expensive linens." Brendan leaned back in his chair. "You brought this on yourself." That sentence ended the last piece of loyalty I still felt toward him. I reached into my handbag and took out my phone. Jessica smirked. "What are you doing? Calling a charity?" Diane laughed. "It is Sunday, sweetheart. Even charities need a day off." I opened the secure message thread with Arthur. My fingers were cold, but they did not shake. I typed 3 words. "Activate Protocol 7. His response appeared immediately. "Confirm immediate activation." I looked at Brendan. He was still smiling. I typed "confirmed, make it effective now." Across the table, Robert's phone vibrated. Then Caleb's, then Vanessa's, then Brendan's. One by one, their smiles disappeared. Robert stared at his screen. "My executive access has been suspended." Caleb refreshed his email. "My procurement account is locked." Vanessa stood up. "My badge has been disabled." "What is happening?" Jessica grabbed her laptop from a side table and tried to log in. A red message filled the screen. "SECS Revrokedi, Diviti Prizier VTYO, Ordiar ACTIV." Brendan turned toward me. "What did you do?" I placed my phone on the table. "I stopped protecting you." From outside came the sound of vehicles entering the driveway. Car doors closed. Footsteps approached. Diane's confidence flickered. "Robert, who is coming?" He did not answer. The front door opened. Graham Voss entered first, wearing a dark suit and carrying a security credential. Behind him came Arthur Bell, Mara Chen, 2 independent attorneys, and 4 members of Meridian's corporate security team. Not one of them looked confused. Not one of them asked who was in charge. Graham walked directly to me. "Chairwoman Lane," he said. "Are you injured? Do you require medical assistance?" The room went silent. Diane's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Brendan stared at Graham, then at me. "What did he call you?" Amara removed her coat and placed it around my shoulders. "Chairwoman Lane," she repeated, "majority owner of Meridian Cross and controlling beneficiary of the Evelyn Cross Legacy Trust." Robert slowly pushed back from the table. "No," he said. "That trust is controlled by institutional representatives." Arthur faced him. "The representatives vote at Ms. Lane's direction." Caleb looked sick. Vanessa whispered, "Cassidy owns Meridian?" 51%, Mara said. "With additional protective voting rights established by the founder." Brendan shook his head. "That is impossible. She is a junior auditor." "I chose to work in operational audit," I said. "I never said it was all I did." His face changed as memory began rearranging itself. The private calls I took. The board decisions that appeared shortly after I raised concerns. The acquisitions I seemed to understand before public announcements. The executives who always returned my messages. For years, he had mistaken discretion for insignificance. Diane gripped the back of her chair. "You lied to us." I stood slowly, water still running from the ends of my hair. "No, you made assumptions. I allowed you to reveal what you believed a powerless person deserved." Robert pointed at Arthur. "You cannot suspend me without board approval." Arthur opened the folder in his hand. Under Article 9 of Meridian's Governance Charter, the controlling shareholder may order temporary suspension when evidence indicates fraud, coercion, destruction of records, or misuse of corporate systems. An independent committee will review all findings within 72 hours. He placed separate envelopes on the table. Robert Hawthorne, Brendan Hawthorne, Caleb Hawthorne, Vanessa Hawthorne, and Jessica Moore, you are each suspended effective immediately. You may not access Meridian property, systems, accounts, offices, or personnel. Jessica looked at Brendan. You said she had nothing. Brendan did not answer. Graham's team collected the company laptop from the side table and asked everyone to surrender work phones. Caleb refused. A security officer calmly informed him that the device belonged to Meridian and was subject to a legal preservation order. Diane suddenly stepped toward me. "Cassidy, This has gone too far. I looked at the empty bucket near my chair. No, it went too far before they arrived. Her voice softened. I was angry. It was a joke. My daughter felt that joke. For the first time, Brendan looked at my stomach instead of my face. Is the baby all right? You lost the right to perform concern for an audience. His expression cracked. Cassidy, please. We can talk privately. We had years to talk privately. He lowered his voice. You cannot destroy my career because our marriage failed. I am not suspending you because you cheated. I am suspending you because evidence shows you certified fraudulent contracts, attempted to access protected ownership records, and pressured a witness to sign a silence agreement. Robert's face turned gray. Diane looked at him. What evidence? Mara answered. 3 years of transfers, internal messages, approval logs, property records, and recorded instructions. Jessica backed away from the table. I only prepared presentations. Brendan told me the vendors were approved. Arthur looked at her. You will have an opportunity to speak with independent counsel. The room erupted. Caleb blamed Robert. Vanessa blamed Caleb. Diane demanded that Brendan fix everything. Robert shouted that no one should say another word. And Brendan kept staring at me as though I had transformed into a stranger, but I had not changed. For the first time, he was simply seeing me without the filter of his own arrogance. Graham arranged a medical examination at a nearby clinic. Before I left, Diane followed me into the hallway. Her voice shook. We are family. I turned back. You taught me tonight exactly what that word means to you. Then I walked out. At the clinic, the doctor confirmed that my daughter was safe, my blood pressure was elevated, and I had mild contractions caused by stress and cold shock. But there was no sign of immediate labor. I sat alone in the examination room wearing a hospital blanket and stared at the wall. The victory did not feel like victory. I had loved Brendan. I had eaten holidays with those people. I had once imagined Diane holding my baby while Robert told stories about Brendan's childhood. The truth had protected me, but it had also buried the future I thought I was building. Arthur arrived after midnight. You can still pause the suspension's pending review, he said. Should I? No. Then why tell me? Because power is safest when someone reminds you that you have a choice. That was why my grandmother had trusted him. I looked down at my stomach. Continue the investigation, follow the facts. No special treatment for them, and none for me. Arthur nodded. What about Brendan? The same rule? The next morning, the story reached Meridian's offices. Not the bucket of water. We kept the personal details private. Employees received a formal notice stating that several executives had been suspended during an independent financial and ethics investigation. By noon, Brendan began his counterattack. He told colleagues I was an unstable ex-wife abusing hidden ownership rights. He claimed I had invented the fraud because he left me. Through an attorney, he threatened to expose my identity publicly unless I restored his access and increased the divorce settlement. The threat arrived by email. That was his third major mistake. Arthur forwarded it to the independent committee as evidence of continued coercion. Then Brendan tried to transfer money from a brokerage account connected to Northvale Strategies. The transaction triggered a federal bank report and a court-approved asset hold. That was his fourth mistake. On Tuesday, the board convened an emergency session. I entered through the main lobby for the first time as the acknowledged owner of Meridian Cross. Employees stopped speaking as I passed. Some recognized me as the quiet auditor who had sat in break rooms asking about scheduling problems and unpaid overtime. Others knew only the rumors. In the boardroom, 12 directors waited around a long glass table. Robert's chair was empty. Brendan's attorney attended by video. The independent team presented its findings for 4 hours. They showed the ownership path of Northvale Strategies. They traced $18.4 million in questionable payments. They displayed messages in which Robert wrote, "Keep it in the family and finance will not ask questions." They showed Caleb requesting inflated invoices. They showed Brendan telling Jessica once Cassidy signs, she cannot say anything about the vendor files. Then they played audio from the dinner, the insults, the demand that I sign, the splash of water, the laughter, and Brendan's voice saying, "You brought this on yourself." No one in the boardroom looked at me when the recording ended. The independent committee voted unanimously to continue every suspension and refer the financial evidence to federal authorities. The board also voted to terminate Robert and Caleb for cause, subject to final legal review. Vanessa, whose involvement was smaller, was placed on extended leave pending a separate inquiry. Jessica requested a cooperation agreement. Brendan's attorney objected to everything. Then I spoke. I want the minutes to reflect that I am abstaining from decisions concerning my divorce or personal relationship. My vote will apply only to corporate protection, evidence preservation, and the integrity of Meridian Cross. One director, an older woman named Helen Ward, studied me for a moment. Why did you remain hidden for so long? I thought about grandmother Evelyn. Because titles make people perform. I wanted to know how this company treated people who appeared to have no title at all. Helen glanced toward Robert's empty chair. And what did you learn? That our biggest risk was never competition. It was entitlement. After the meeting, I returned to my office on the 42nd floor. It had remained unused for years, except during private meetings. My grandmother's original drafting table stood near the window. Above it hung a photograph of her in the First Meridian workshop, holding a soldering iron and smiling with grease on her cheek. Inside the bottom drawer, I found a sealed envelope I had read only once. Cassidy, if you are sitting in this office because someone forced you to reveal yourself, remember this: justice is not the same as revenge. Revenge asks how much pain you can cause. Justice asks what truth requires. Choose truth even when anger offers you something faster. I read those words 3 times, then my phone rang. It was Diane. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. She was crying. Federal agents are asking about the properties, she said. They froze one of our accounts. You need an attorney. You could stop this. No, I cannot. You own the company? I do not own the law. Her crying stopped. For 1 second, the old contempt returned. You enjoyed humiliating us. I looked at my grandmother's letter. No, Diane. I endured being humiliated by you. There is a difference. Then I ended the call. Jessica met with investigators the next day. She admitted that Brendan had instructed her to alter market reports and hide conflicts connected to North Vale. She provided messages showing that he planned to marry her after the divorce and move money into an overseas account. She also revealed something I had not known. Brendan had never intended to support our daughter voluntarily. In one message he wrote, once Cassidy is off Meridian payroll, she will accept whatever I offer. The baby is leverage until the papers are signed. I read that sentence in Arthur's office. The room became very quiet. Infidelity had broken my heart. That message removed the final illusion that Brendan's cruelty was temporary. He had viewed his own unborn child as leverage. My sadness hardened into clarity. I instructed my family law attorney to pursue a fair, transparent custody process. I would not use my wealth to erase Brendan as a father, but I would not allow him to use our daughter as a bargaining chip. Every decision would be documented. Every request would go through counsel. Every visit would follow whatever safeguards the court considered appropriate. 2 weeks later, Brendan asked to meet me. The meeting took place in a conference room with both attorneys present. He looked older. The perfect suits were gone. He wore a wrinkled shirt and had dark circles beneath his eyes. For several minutes, he said nothing. Then he asked the question that had been consuming him. Were you testing me our entire marriage? No. You watched me think you were poor. I watched you decide that being poor would make someone unworthy of respect. You should have told me. Would it have changed how you treated me? Of course. That is exactly why I did not. He looked away. I loved you. I believe you loved the version of me that made you feel powerful. His eyes filled with tears. Can you make the investigation disappear? There it was. Not, can you forgive me? Not, is our daughter safe? Not, how did I become this person? Can you make the consequences disappear? No, I said. He leaned forward. I will leave Jessica. I will sign anything. I will go to counseling. Or marriage ended before the dinner, then do it for the baby. I am doing this for the baby. I want her to grow up knowing that love without respect is not love. He covered his face with both hands. For a moment, I saw the young man who had sat beside me after my grandmother died. I mourned him, but I did not mistake mourning for a reason to return. The investigation continued for 6 months. Federal prosecutors filed charges connected to wire fraud, conspiracy, false financial certifications, and attempted obstruction. Robert and Caleb fought the case. Brendan eventually accepted a plea agreement after Jessica's messages, and the banking records made denial impossible. Diane was not charged with the central fraud, but several properties purchased through questionable transfers were seized or sold to satisfy restitution claims. Vanessa was cleared of criminal involvement, but terminated for using her role to conceal conflicts and retaliate against employees who raised concerns. Jessica cooperated, lost her position, and faced her own civil penalties. I did not celebrate any of it. I celebrated something else. The employees who had been ignored began speaking. A purchasing analyst named Louise admitted that Caleb had threatened his job after he questioned an invoice. A finance manager named Priya showed investigators how Robert bypassed approval limits. Two assistants revealed that Jessica had ordered them to delete meeting notes. People who had felt powerless discovered that the truth had room for them. That changed Meridian more than the scandal itself. We created an independent ethics office that reported directly to the board. We banned executives from supervising relatives without special review. We strengthened whistleblower protections. We expanded paid parental leave and emergency childcare support after I learned how many employees were choosing between newborns and paychecks. And I began visiting offices openly as chairwoman, but I kept eating in employee cafeterias. I kept asking receptionists whether visitors were respectful. I kept reading complaints that senior leaders preferred to ignore. Power had finally become visible, but I refused to let it become distant. My daughter was born on a clear October morning. I named her Evelyn Grace Lane. Evelyn for the woman who taught me patience. Grace for the quality I wanted to keep even after cruelty tried to take it from me. When the nurse placed her in my arms, every boardroom lawsuit and accusation disappeared. She opened her eyes for only a moment. Her hand closed around my finger, and I understood that the most important thing I would ever build was not a company. It was the life in front of me. Brendan saw her for the first time through a court-approved visit several weeks later. He cried when he held her. I stood on the other side of the room with a supervisor present. Part of me wished his tears could rewrite the past. They could not. But I also knew my daughter deserved a mother who made decisions from wisdom, not vengeance. So I followed the court's guidance. I protected her without teaching her hatred. I kept boundaries without turning them into weapons. That was the hardest kind of strength I ever learned. A year after the dinner, I returned to the Hawthorne house one final time. It no longer belonged to them. The property had been sold as part of a restitution agreement. The new owner allowed me to collect a box of personal items that had been stored in the attic after the divorce. The dining room was empty. The Persian rug was gone. The table had been removed. Sunlight fell across the hardwood floor where I had once sat soaked and humiliated. For a few seconds, I could still hear their laughter. Then Evelyn made a small sound from the carrier against my chest. I looked down at her round cheeks and bright eyes. The memory lost its power. I had thought justice would feel like watching the Hawthornes lose their jobs, their money, and their influence. But standing in that empty room, I realized justice was not what they had lost. Justice was what I had recovered. My voice, my dignity, my daughter's future, and the company my grandmother built for people who believed work should mean something more than feeding the pride of powerful families. Before I end, let me leave you with a short summary of my story. I married a man who believed my quiet life meant I had no power. His family treated me like a poor burden, pressured me to surrender my rights, and tried to silence me while they hid misconduct inside the company they all worked for. When my ex-mother-in-law poured filthy ice water over me during dinner, I activated a legal emergency protocol. The truth about my ownership came out, but more importantly, so did the evidence of fraud, coercion, and betrayal. Their downfall did not happen because I was wealthy. It happened because they had mistaken privilege for protection. And what can we learn from this story? Never measure a person's worth by clothing, income, job title, family name, or how quietly they enter a room. Respect should not depend on what someone can do for you. Also remember that silence is not always weakness. Sometimes a quiet person is gathering facts, protecting peace, or waiting until the truth is strong enough to stand on its own. Most of all, justice is not about causing the greatest pain. It is about ending the lie, protecting the innocent, and refusing to become cruel just because cruelty was used against you. Thank you for listening to my story. Please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what you would have done in my place. The Hawthornes thought I was powerless because I never announced my strength. What they never understood was this: I was not silent because I had nothing to say. I was silent because the truth did not need to shout.